Hi, this is Carrie Brownstein.
This is DJ Premier.
This is Darren Aronofsky.
You got the RZA right here.
Rose McGowan.
Radiohead.
Aisha Tyler.
Tribe Called Quest. Fred Armisen.
Prince Paul.
Javier Munoz. Seth Meyers.
Frankie Cosmos.
Flying Lotus.
Hi, we're Chaim, and you're listening to the Talkhouse Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Talkhouse Podcast. I'm Josh Modell. On this week's episode, we've got a pair of New Zealanders who forged incredible careers in music and comedy and comedic music, Jemaine Clement and Ruban Nielson. Now, I'm guessing Clement is best known to our listeners as half of Flight of the Conchords, his musical and acting duo with Bret McKenzie. They haven't put out a record or toured much in the last decade or so, but their albums and HBO series definitely endure with subtle hilarity. Clement has, of course, been plenty busy post-Conchords as both an actor and director. His 2014 mockumentary What We Do in the Shadows, co-directed with his old friend Taika Waititi, spun off into one of the funniest shows on TV. And you've also heard or seen him in everything from Despicable Me to the latest Avatar movie. In the awful event that you're not familiar with Flight of the Conchords, here's a little bit of their David Bowie tribute, simply called Bowie, which is discussed a bit in this episode.
This is Bowie to Bowie. Do you hear me out there, man? This is Bowie back to Bowie. I read you loud and clear, man. Oh, yeah, man. Your signals weak on my radar screen. How far out are you, man? I'm pretty far out. That's pretty far out, man.
Now, Clement seemed excited and well prepared to speak with Ruban Nielson, the singer-guitarist behind Unknown Mortal Orchestra. Though both of these guys are, as I said, from New Zealand and fans of each other's work, they had never met before. UMO, as Nielson's band is known for short, has been making a sort of uncategorizable music since about 2010. They most often get pegged as psychedelic rock, which isn't wrong, but also doesn't tell the whole story. There are also elements of lo-fi indie rock, a bit of funk, and some garage rock. But the fact that it's tough to name is part of what makes UMO's music so appealing. Check out a little bit of their song The Garden, which opens the latest UMO album, V. These guys have a fantastic conversation that spans everything from the history of New Zealand and their shared Maori heritage to an in-depth examination of the Jagstang, a guitar designed by Kurt Cobain and favored by Nielson. They talk about bombing on stage and getting bombed before going on stage. And they share stories about coming up in a shared place. Also, you'll hear the phrase sad, funky ghost, perhaps for the first and last time in your life. Enjoy.
Hi, Jemaine. I feel like I won a competition or something to meet you and talk to you. The first time I'd ever heard something you'd made was on BFM, and it was the Lord of the Rings song.
Oh, yeah.
So I just remember this line from that. It's like, I don't rap about bitches and hoes. I rap about riches and trolls. But I was thinking that's way before the album came out.
It was after the first trailer came out, at least. We played it on TV, I think, in a live thing maybe, and someone thought it would be a good idea to try and release it. So we hadn't recorded anything before, and we did go and record that with the idea that it would somehow be a hit off the back of the Lord of the Rings franchise. We didn't quite get that together. One time we had to play that in front of the cast. They were still filming here in Wellington, and we had to, I had to be Ian McKellen in front of Ian McKellen, and we were making these really quite insulting impressions of them in front of them. But one really cool thing we did get to see is Andy Serkis was there, and he asked if he could get up after us, and he did a rap battle between Smeagol and Gollum, and we didn't record it. We should have.
Wow.
We were discussing, should we record this? And we felt too naughty. I feel like I hear your music every day somewhere. When I go into town, it's playing somewhere in any city in the world. I'm always glad to hear it.
That's nice.
And I'm really loving this album. I've been listening to it a lot, especially this one song, I Killed Captain Cook, which is very interesting. It's a very beautiful song melodically. Just acoustic guitar, which is quite unusual in amongst the rest of the album. Can you tell me about that song?
It's funny because it's hard to convey to people outside of New Zealand how ubiquitous Captain Cook is. like everything's named after him and the history and everything.
Yeah, a lot of hotels used to be on our money even when I was a kid for sure. He used to be in the watermark. You hold it up to the light, you'd see the ghost of Captain Cook.
My mum had this thing where she used to always talk about how like Hawaiians killed Captain Cook, and like she was always like really proud of that and thought it was really funny and all this stuff, which was like really different, her attitude.
In New Zealand, he's talked about as rather insultingly, for you and I both have Maori parents. He's talked about as the discoverer of New Zealand. And,
he's the Columbus of the South Seas, right? And also whatever is how I try to explain it to people. Yeah. And
our parents' response, I'm sure, is like, it was discovered 800 years before he even got here. But yeah, he's a controversial figure, I suppose, and but not to the degree of Christopher Columbus. But the Hawaiian story is pretty interesting, right? Because and I didn't know this until recently, that he was killed because he kidnapped a chief.
Yeah.
In Hawaii.
Yeah, I guess that kicked everything off. The thing for me was always just like trying to write a kind of Hawaiian song, and then sort of trying to write something to amuse my mum, really, I think. And then like because I don't have any like really like visceral anger or anything around that around him particularly, because he was like in Polynesia for a long time, and so he had times when he was really in good faith, like interacting with Polynesian culture, and other times when he was just more of a colonizer. But I think later on in his life, he was like became more cynical and kind of maybe just like tired and like sick of going to the islands or something. So I just kind of thought it would be a song that my mom would like, because it was about one of the subject that she would always like light up about.
We don't hear much about that part of Captain Cook, or we didn't used to, about his life or his death. We didn't hear about it much. Sometimes you'd hear the Hawaiians killed him.
Yeah.
That you didn't know what the story is, and there is an interesting story. It's hard to know what Hawaii or New Zealand would be like without the influence of Captain Cook, but you can still have empathy for your ancestors, and ancestors are a very important part in all Polynesian culture. There's a sense that they're watching over you. If you dream about, I think everyone in our families dreamt about, ancient Maori people are watching them at some point. I once had this dream. I was in this little town called Eureka, and there was a terrible massacre there of Indian people where the settlers had killed a lot of women and children while the men were hunting. And I had this dream that I was in the town, and the Indian people were coming to get revenge. And I was like, oh, no, I'm not one of them. I just happened to be here. Their weapons weren't weapons. They were like gardening tools and things like that. And I'm like, oh, they're not attacking. And then I looked again, and they weren't Native American. They were Maori people. And I was like, oh, it's just similar. It's a confusing dream, but
I'm safe.
Yeah, I'm safe. But yeah, that song, it has a really beautiful but scary imagery. You use the word visceral. It's, very, it's violent and pretty. It's a really interesting song.
Thank you.
The Hawaiian culture and the Maori culture are very similar, but very different. And you've grown up in those two. Did you go through your life looking at those similarities and differences?
Yeah, probably one of the main themes, growing up was trying to figure out how to translate Hawaiianness and Pākehā-ness, and this idea that my cousins, I talk to my cousins and they would be really similar, that they have American accents and stuff like that, and then they, I think, had the same thing with this, oh, you're into all the same stuff as me, but you talk like Crocodile Dundee or whatever. And so that was always a weird thing, but it's also, having Pākehā family and stuff like that. That was also a big contrast, which I think really influenced, I guess, aesthetics or I feel a lot of the times growing up, I don't know if you felt this way, but you would, it'd be camps, there's segregation. And if you're kind of more mixed, it's you don't really see this kind of boundary where Polynesian culture starts. And
that's right. Yeah, I do feel like that. Yeah.
I feel it's a good thing for a creative person.
There's not as many differences as people think, is how I felt.
that's true as well. And then like also I just think it's quite healthy when you're doing something creative to already have this like, I guess, like kind of porous view of culture.
I'm 3/4 Pakeha, but I don't know my Pakeha family. I never met them,
Really, the whole family?
But I know that I look Pakeha to most people.
Yeah.
But and for those of you who don't know, the Pakeha is basically white, European. That's the Maori word for it. Your music's like mixed race as well. So it's like, it's got big funk influences, but I wouldn't say it's funk. And I always read it's psychedelic whenever it's described as psychedelic, and I wouldn't have thought it, I wouldn't have described it like that. Would you call your music psychedelic?
I think it's like I started out being really interested in like 60s music, which I suppose like psychedelia was a big part of that, like London, the London scene and like Laurel Canyon and all that kind of stuff. Like
what bands and musicians were your influences there?
The things I keep coming back to would be like Love, like Arthur Lee and Sly Stone, Zappa. It's interesting. I'm reading a book at the moment, which is like a bunch of conspiracy theories around Laurel Canyon. And there's like all these heroes of mine that like families with military backgrounds and all that kind of stuff. And it's really interesting because it's kind of like, a level of depth, like getting kind of deeper into the kind of knowledge or whatever, but some part of me just wants to be an innocent fan. Like I was thinking about how much of that is in Flight of the Conchords too. Like the Bowie song is just like, I always really loved the Bowie song because it just is like unbridled, like Bowie. I just like Bowie love,
Yeah, we're not making fun of him exactly. We're just trying to be like him.
You're making fun of like how you kind of pick up a bunch of things that you think Bowie's about without like getting too caught up in the seriousness of it. I don't know if it's a New Zealand thing or what, but it's sort of like a naivety, like where I just sometimes just want to enjoy things, like get trapped in my first impressions of them, like the first kind of early idea of like Sly Stone.
When I'd see pictures of the band or videos of the band, that I'd think I want to be in that band.
Yeah.
It looks like a fun time, and what a great sound to be part of.
Yeah, just so much positivity. And then they were also, I remember, part of the whatever discourse or whatever around them when you would see them on TV or in documentaries or whatever was always that it was like mixed gender, mixed race band. And it was like proof of concept of like a bunch of people all getting along.
Yeah.
Like a little microcosm of society.
Because that happens in music all the time where you influence, different musicians, like hip hop's influenced by classical music and pop music influenced by blues, and all these things happen. But they did it on stage, where they put all these things together.
I still really love that, and I think it's pretty funny because of the way how dark the world seems to be getting. But like, I still kind of like that cheesiness. Like it's definitely not fashionable to be. So I feel like music was kind of this thing where people would just be like, you'd just be able to say like, can we all just get along and then get down, and then everybody would have a party and then roll credits. But like,
well, the music is the place where that does happen. You don't even need to speak the same language as someone to be able to play with them, to jam with them.
Yeah.
I used to have a flat in Wellington, and we used to play really loudly bass guitar, drums, and we used to live across the road from this fish factory.
Yeah.
And it was really loud. But they would still complain about our noise.
Yeah.
But they would have trucks out there at 6 a.m. But then one day, there's this knock on this door. This guy in white overalls, like my dad used to wear at the Freezing Works, and holding these drumsticks. And he was like, "Play? Can I play?" And he's Russian. His name was Andre, and we played with him for like 3 hours after work. And he had really broken English, but he's like, "I like to play rock and roll." And then we just played with him, and he was great. He hadn't played for 20 years, but he had been hearing us and wanting to ask if he can play. And so he just came with his sticks and his few things he could say, and we didn't need to really communicate with words, and music's in one place.
Yeah, that's really, really beautiful.
It was great. He never came around again. He probably thought those guys are shit.
I don't want to forget to say this, but when me and Cody and Paul first moved to the States was when the Flight of the Conchords TV show was out. And it was so weird because it was like getting started in Portland, and what the show was about was like almost like it's like a little guide, or we kind of kept like paralleling with stuff that was happening to us, like because it's basically a TV show about these Kiwi guys like trying to negotiate America.
We also influence how people see New Zealanders.
Yeah.
A lot of people used to thank us New Zealanders living in America, saying no one could understand my accent until that show came on.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like we'd literally go to some cafe and do a gig, and then there would be an episode that would come out about you guys going to a cafe and having a really awkward gig. It was really helpful in a way. Like I think it would have been a lot more lonely, like trying to figure out America. And I still feel like that's a weird thing, like trying to convert your sense of humor into translate it into Americans.
I lived in LA and in New York, and people understand 97% of what you mean. It's just that 3% was that lonely area that you're talking about where no one understands this part of my mind.
Yeah.
Unless I find an Australian or New Zealander. When I was trying to think why your music's called psychedelic, I looked up your gear board, your equip board page.
Yeah.
And that's, if you don't know, the listener, the one listener that we have on this podcast, it's a page that tells you musicians and all the gear that's been recorded that they use. And I noticed you use a Jagstang guitar, a Fender Jagstang, which is quite unusual because it's a hybrid of two different guitars, and it was invented by Kurt Cobain.
Yeah.
And do you know how he invented it?
I think he took a picture of a Jaguar and a picture of a Mustang and Jaguar and Mustang, and cut them and sent it to Fender. Yeah,
that's right. And then gave it to Fender and said, make me this. This is my perfect guitar. I don't feel like I see them played very often, but is yours a 90s one, or is it in one of the new ones?
It's a 90s one, but the way that I got into the Jagstang was that I had a friend because I went to Elam Art School in Auckland, and I had a friend there, and he always had this, he kind of messed around on the guitar. This is kind of a long-winded story, but his dad was a monk.
I'm ready. I'm listening. I'm here, me and the listener.
I think the whole thing was his dad wanted him to be a monk, and he was mucking around in New Zealand studying painting and playing this Jagstang. And then his dad got sick, and he went back to Japan to, I think, pretend he was going to be a monk so that his dad would die being like, oh, good, he's given it up.
Thinking,
Yeah, there was this girl that we knew, and he gave her the guitar and said, keep this for ages and then give it to Ruban. And so she didn't know how long he meant. But, I was in this other band called the Mint Chicks, a punk band. And at some point, she just like came to one of the gigs and said, Kosuke said, keep this for ages and then give it to you. And then so years after he went back to Japan, I got this guitar. And then I was like, I suppose I better learn how to use it. But the weird thing was that guitar changed my whole style. Like the way that I played it, it was like, I suppose that's where the psychedelic thing came from, because I didn't really want to play punk music on it.
Why is that? Because the music that you play in the Mint Chicks it's very technically very different, right? It's like it's all downstrokes on the card, rock chords.
Yeah,
it's almost the opposite approach to the guitar.
I had a Telecaster, and I would just bash on it really, and it was pretty indestructible. So you could do it, but the Jagstang is quite delicate instruments. So I had to play it totally differently, but it kind of gave birth to a whole new band, really. So it's like one of the things about the Jagstang is it's got this really dodgy neck. Like you can kind of bend the whole guitar, so it kind of twists.
Well, that's because it was designed from two Polaroids.
And like the other thing is Kurt Cobain didn't like the guitar. Like he got it and he was like, oh, cool. And he would just have it and they would send him and I think if he broke a string and he just had nothing else to play, he might like play it, and he just like hardly ever played it. It was like he didn't like it. But I actually think it's my favorite Fender guitar. It's just like the whole neck is just kind of wobbly.
Yeah.
The neck itself. So you can kind of twist and turn the neck. And that I really like that. So that was cool. And then the other thing was like the Jagstang's really light. And so we made this guitar that's like 5 pounds. And so I can kind of like hold the guitar out like this.
And you've got a really unique way of holding the guitar, because when I looked at the photos of you, I tried it, which is you have it on what I would call the wrong shoulder, the strap.
Yeah.
You put it on your strumming shoulder. People usually put it over their fretting shoulder.
Yeah.
And you hold it higher than anyone I've seen, except maybe the classical player who has their knee up. So where did that come from, holding a guitar like that?
I think I got it from John Dwyer from the OCs.
Yeah.
He's got the guitar way up here. So for a while, I actually held it way up like that. And then over the years, I think it was just because my strap just like stretched and I was too lazy to like ratchet it back up again.
Does that help your fingering that you're doing, having it that height?
Yeah, I mean, it is nice.
Often rock players, heavy metal players hold it really low because it looks...
Yeah, Chris Novoselic or like Jimmy Page wear the guitar super low. So when I was a kid, that was like the cool way to wear the guitar.
That's right.
A lot of the stuff I do I think is like trolling or like being contrarian or like, just doing everything wrong. Like even the way that UMO is, I think a lot of it was to do with reacting against the punk scene in New Zealand and just like these kind of rules about what was cool and what isn't, and trying to do everything wrong, like guitar solos.
You don't do those.
Yeah, it was like really off. Yeah, it was like against the rules or something.
I remember seeing an interview with one of the guitarists from the Sex Pistols talking about when the other guitarist turned up and saying you would try and teach him Beatles chords.
Oh, yeah.
And say, no, we're not doing that. It's like, that's one of the rules.
Yeah.
You're not doing these funny chords.
Yeah. And so punk is, I think it's a reaction against stuff, but then I also thought that it was really funny to kind of piss off the old punks as well, like the people that we really looked up to. When I was a kid, I used to listen to Public Image Limited, and they were always like, to me, they seemed like they were always really trolling people a lot and like trying to do things that would be confusing or whatever. And I just think it's just fun, I think, to like take that out into the public,
But most people who are watching you don't know that, right?
It's pretty subtle. I feel weird talking to you about it because, this... because you're like, I don't know, because you've made me laugh so much, like you're a proper comedian. And then like, I feel like what I think of as humor in my music is it's not funny.
Sometimes the best humor to me is when only you find it funny. Like, oh, this one's just for me.
Yeah.
And even when we're writing comedy, you go, when you write for a play or a song or whatever, there's some, that people probably aren't going to laugh at, but you laugh. So it makes it interesting for you.
I think it's sort of part of that thing, right? You're going to have got to get from, like, at a live show, you have to get from the beginning of the show to the end of the show. So it's like important that the performance or whatever be worth people's time or have some value, but you can't be standing up there bored going through the motions. It might be 6 months or a year or 2 years or whatever of touring. And so, these things, these little in-jokes between you and the other musicians or jokes that you have with yourself or ways that you have with coping with the material or whatever yourself is actually really important, even though, it's not for the benefit of other people.
Yeah, you don't want to robotically recreate the same show every night, but the audience also, they want some consistency as well as some interest, and you got to find a balance of, do they want it to sound exactly like the album? And I think nowadays people don't.
Yeah.
We want it to sound exactly like the album, like people used to.
We're like anti-backing track, like we never use backing tracks.
I'm often disappointed when a band has the bass on a backing track or, things like that. It's always disappointing to see an Apple logo on a stage to me.
We didn't grow up with any money, so I also feel really like I don't want to take my nice laptop on stage because like that's where booze is being spilled and people like run on stage. And maybe it's because we used to have a lot more chaotic shows back in the old days, but like I could never imagine.
It was okay with your Telecaster, but with your delicate Jagstang, you gotta be careful.
Yeah, and I hate the idea of having an expensive piece of like digital equipment that breaks down or crashes or something halfway through a song, or
it's terrifying.
Yeah,
I've got a powered pedal board and it sometimes gives up. It sometimes just gives up an hour in. I've never taken it on stage, but it's so worrying. I've mentioned it to other musicians even, and it's like, oh, that would be the worst.
Yeah, you know, even a pedal that has like too many knobs on it is too complicated for me.
Yeah.
When I'm on stage. And I also have this kind of thing where I started to realize like I want to be able to be too drunk and still put on a good show. So anything that's too delicate or involves too much concentration.
You don't want to lean down and be fiddly with knobs while you're drunk.
If I need to turn a knob, I want to be able to just twist it with my foot. Also, you know, really dumb stuff like that. It's like, that's when I feel like I have my dream job, you know.
Well, yeah. I mean, often though, you know, people you like, when you look up their equipment, like Mick Ronson, David Bowie's guitarist, he has 2 pedals, I think, or 1 pedal.
Yeah.
you know, and it leaves it in the same place and it sounds great.
I did some homework because I realized that, you know, somebody was asking me, did you name, because I have a song called Nadia on the new record, and then people were asking me if it was named after the character from
What We Do in the Shadows.
What They Do in the Shadows. And I realized I don't have any other reference for that name.
Oh, yeah. So it's the same spelling with a J.
I think you got the name from a movie from the 90s.
Yeah.
So I watched that movie and it was really, really sick. I thought it was an amazing movie.
Yeah.
It was like produced by David Lynch, I think.
I remember seeing it, and the next day saying to Taika, we got to do some vampire thing.
That's really cool.
We did some vampire characters on stage, and eventually we made the movie. And and I have to thank that movie Nadia for starting that all off, and so that character in the TV show's named after that film.
It's really weird because I have this like kind of superstition about songs that I don't know what they're about, but that I'll discover what they're about later. And there's always some kind of like weird synchronistic kind of chain of thoughts that leads me to discovering what it's about. And the song was kind of about this thing that's happened to me where I've been in love with a woman and then they've fallen in love with another woman. And so the song is kind of like, it's not about one incident. It's about the overlapping of this repeating thing that has happened to me multiple.
Oh, that's happened more than once.
Yeah, but it's really weird because that movie...
You're attracted to gay women.
I think so. But the thing is that Nadia, the movie, it's about a couple, you know, it's like a guy and his wife gets seduced by the daughter of Dracula, and he's trying to save or get his wife back from this like amazing supernatural woman or whatever. And I was like, this is, you know, it's just one of those things where you're just kind of like, oh my God, this is really, really wild.
So you didn't think about the movie when you were writing the song, didn't you?
Well, I didn't know that movie. I hadn't seen it yet.
Oh, you watched the movie after the song.
Yeah. It's just one of those things where it's like the chain of events, the way that things happen, they've happened in the wrong order, but they make sense to me in some way. And that happens a lot with writing stuff, I think.
Yeah. Well, Brett and I, when we write songs, we don't usually write like that because we have to know what it's about, because the audience has to know what it's about straight away to laugh at it.
Yeah.
But you're not going for that reaction. When we first started writing songs, I remember Brett showing me a chord and going, hey, do you know this was a major seventh? Oh, cool. And he's like, that sounds cool. Like Serge Gainsbourg, and then playing on in that, and you know, using all the French phrases we had, and then that's our French song. That was our first song we wrote together.
Yeah,
that's one thing I love about music is just a little, you know, the tiniest thing can inspire a whole song.
One thing I'm fascinated with about comedy, and one thing that it won't leave me alone, is like in music you can't bomb.
You can get booed off though.
You can get booed, or you can also turn your amp up, or you can turn it into kind of like a chaotic kind of like meltdown. I don't know why I envy this about comedians, but I envy the bomb, because I feel like bombing seems to be the thing that kind of forges you into a great performer. There's no good comedian who's like, I've never bombed. It's like you bomb over and over again, and it also sounds like a nightmare, like a bad dream.
It makes it a bit edgy. I got really used to being on stage where it didn't make me nervous at all, and started to wonder if that was going to be to my detriment. But when I act, in movies on the first day or a TV show, I still get nervous, and I think perhaps that's a part, that's a part of what keeps you awake, like your private jokes to yourself when you're playing. Did you? Yeah. Is this your first tour back since the pandemic?
Yeah, we just did about a month of shows, and we had to kind of relearn it. We have a new member in the band, and my memory's not very good. Some musicians have great photographic memories, and I don't really have that. But
I'm really jealous of those people.
Yeah,
who can recall a song they haven't heard since 1984 and play it and remember the lyrics.
And I've learned so many songs. Like I should, if I remembered every song I've ever learned, every like cover I've ever learned, I would know hundreds and hundreds. But I barely know my own songs half the time.
I think Brett and I both have that quality of not remembering other songs very well, and that's what pushed us into writing songs. We couldn't remember the songs. And that David Bowie song, we were trying to learn David Bowie songs.
Oh, okay.
And they're so complicated.
Yeah.
So let's make up our own one, and then we played it on stage. But that does, writing it helps you remember it, right? Because you have a different kind of memory, not just the sound, but where your hands are, and you do it over and over again, trying to figure out the parts. How do you write a song? Do you have one approach that you usually take, or does it differ?
I don't know if you do this as well, but sometimes I start with the name of the song. Like I Killed Captain Cook. The idea for the song actually started with the name, because from being in a punk band, I was thinking like that would be a really good punk song, like by some Hawaiian hardcore band or something.
So that's why it sounds so different to what I thought it was going to sound like. It's so gentle, and it's quite mournful,
Yeah, so I guess that was the next step, was thinking it sounds like some punk song, like a Polynesian punk song. And so maybe I should make it, more like really Hawaiian and have this kind of like a cool breeze kind of element to it. And then so I started to kind of write it using the like Hawaiian thing. If you think of a joke, or you think of something funny for a song, you kind of like write that down and put it away for later. Do you ever do that, or do you always write it?
Yeah, some songs took 20 minutes to write, and some took years. Like I had another idea for that song from 5 years ago or 10 years ago. One time we had a show coming up, and we had to write some new songs for it, and we just wrote a list of like 15 song titles, and then we asked our friends and flatmates, just tick the ones you want to hear. We hadn't written them.
Yeah.
And they're like, I want to hear something special for all the ladies in the world. I want to hear that. So we're going to write that.
Okay, cool.
We have done that as a technique. And sometimes it starts off with an idea for a story.
Yeah.
I guess, you've done that as well. A lot of your songs are personal to you, and then some are, is it unusual for you to think of yourself as a character or another person?
I've only done like one song where I was talking to Jake, the bass player in my band. He works with this guy, Alex G, and he said that Alex is like really like reads a lot and kind of reads a bunch of books.
I know some of those people.
Yeah, and they like read. I don't read that much. I used to when I was a kid, but like a lot of nonfiction, especially. I mean, a lot of fiction. Sorry, which is really what I don't read anymore. I don't read enough fiction.
No, I know what you mean, because it's it takes effort to get through a book, and when you're reading a fiction book, sometimes I think, this isn't even true.
It seems silly.
Why am I learning this about this life that didn't happen?
Yeah, this guy's just making this up, isn't he? So I think Alex's way of writing is that he would kind of imagine himself as these characters and kind of like go through the song like that. And I thought that's a really good idea, because then you don't have to screw your life up to make songs. And then and I was thinking like, that's another thing that's really dumb about me, or one thing that I'm kind of stuck with, is I can't reinterpret myself as a character.
You've done it in that Captain Cook song. you imagining?
Oh yeah. And the new album I have like Layla as well, because I was thinking about my mum and my uncle and kind of trying to imagine myself through them. So I'm like slowly getting more sophisticated as a writer, but like I thought for a long time that what I have to do is I have to go out into the world, have a bunch of adventures that screw up my emotional well-being. And then with all of that noise in my head, then I would just kind of have to be dumping it into songs. And that would be, then that used to be the only way that I could write the songs.
Yeah, and that presents a risk as a comedian and as a songwriter. What if I become happy and successful?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's going to ruin everything.
That's really terrifying, because I don't even want to become less dysfunctional, like just because it's so fruitful.
You want to keep the amount you have.
Yeah, without hurting people. Like it's obviously like I want to become less of a dick like every day, but at the same time sometimes I think like, oh, I don't really want to like wipe out my depression. It happens a lot with comedians though. I mean, or it seems to, where they get to a certain point and then they start doing these like huge vehicles, and then you're like, I don't even find this funny. Steve Martin used to be hilarious, and now he's like making these movies for everyone else. He's not even sad anymore. You kind of get this idea that they've become like well adjusted, and you're like, oh, well, I'm happy for you, but all your screwed up stuff was the stuff that really spoke to him.
Right, you don't relate to it anymore.
Yeah, I think I'm not more worried about that as a fan. I'm more worried about that as like when I'm making stuff that I think like, well, I don't want to lose my edge or whatever.
Yeah. And I on this album, there's at least one instrumental track, right?
Oh yeah, I think there's a few. I mean, there's kind of like a few kind of half instrumental ones.
There's one that it made me think it was felt like a soundtrack about a story about a sad, funky ghost. That's what I thought when I heard. Yeah, so a movie I want to see.
I think I have a few songs about sad, funky ghosts, kind of.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of like what I want to become one day. Rather than go to like heaven or hell, it would be funny to be like a sad
wandering
ghost. Yeah, wandering sad funky ghost.
I was wondering who listening to your music, like it's a lot of it. Most of it's danceable, but in quite a reserved way, like where you just want to move your hips. Yeah. I was wondering what your audience looks like. I've never seen you live. How do people dance? I can't show people on the podcast. I imagine it's like this, like they with their hand over their belly. And
there's a bit of that. They're quite nice people. Like I kind of feel like I cull the fan base quite a bit. Like I try to chase off. Like I always feel like if there's an element of like a type of guy that's getting into the band for whatever reason, then I'll try to do a bunch of stuff to chase them away.
Are you talking about when you become popular, your audience changes?
And,
Or are you talking about a specific person that you'll see in the show being annoying?
Well, it's like maybe I'll see a person, I think, I don't want to see this guy ever again or whatever. And then I really feel like I spend probably more time, I mean, apart from in the time that I'm like obviously going out and performing and writing and trying to make this thing like what I think is really good. As far as marketing is concerned, I spend probably way more of my time trying to try to cull the audience. You know what I mean?
Yeah, your record company is not going to like that, hearing that. But I know what you mean. Doing live shows, sometimes there'll be, you can see 1,000 happy faces and you'll see one guy who's hating it.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I have often gone, I'm going to concentrate on that guy. I'm going to make it so fucking whimsical. I'm going to be so gentle now. He's going to really hate this. This is going to be the gentlest comedy you've ever fucking seen. But sometimes I wonder if it's just his face, because I've heard that, in shows that I've gone to see, which I've enjoyed perfectly, and then people go, oh, I heard you went to that show and you hated it the whole time. It's like, oh, no, it's just the shape of my mouth.
On the new tour, it was like trying to deal with all the new characteristics of Gen Z.
People who are 20, they've never been to a show.
Yeah.
Because they haven't been able to go to shows for the last 4 years, just the way as we haven't been able to play them. And they're all kind of amazed. I went to a concert a couple of months ago, and they were like, that's mind-blowing. It's extra exciting for them, but it's really nice to see as well. Feel sorry for them.
The new audience, they're really like wild, but really like chill. It's kind of like, there would be people just like I was just kind of like, are those people having sex like in the middle of the dance floor?
Your music's a bit like that. Like, you get those people.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I want. I don't want to be misunderstood and get people who aren't like that, I suppose.
Yeah.
Because it's not like, because my old band, we had a punk band, me and Cody had a punk band called The Mint Chicks, and there was a lot of kind
I remember you guys. Remember your posters round. It's crazy, yes, dumb, no.
Yeah.
I was really attracted by that imagery, the exclamation marks. It's really bold. And I remember you being one of the New Zealand acts that were around at the same time we were starting to play in America, or, starting to tour in America.
Yeah, there was some anger in the music. Like, it was kind of like, maybe for me, it wasn't like necessarily anger, but it's just like, kind of like young, sexually frustrated men music.
And what do you say? Do you think this is more sexually satisfied music? It's definitely got a sexual element.
No,
anger
that's
there's
one
still
thing.
anger in your music though, but it's in the lyrics. It's not in the sound.
No, it's sad. It's not angry.
I'm interested by the song "The Garden," which is the one that's been in my head. What's that one about?
I don't know, because that's, like, I have to...
You're waiting to find out what it's about.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I know kind of partly what it's about. It's kind of about just another breakup kind of song, but I still am slowly piecing together what The Garden is or whatever. And I think when I first started thinking about it, I think it was just a way of trying to explain just how screwed up everything felt, like how nothing kind of feels right anymore, or like, and maybe the garden is like the Garden of Eden, or just kind of the earth.
Because you're talking about violence.
Yeah.
After dark in the garden. The garden's a perfect place, but there's something that you don't see in it at first.
Yeah, and it's just kind of like gone sour. I don't really know exactly, because often I'll write these lyrics and then I'll think, that's a good line. I like, or not a good line, but I might think, okay, that's good. That's going in the song. I like it.
I know what you mean. You're a New Zealander. You're not allowed to say that.
Yeah.
You feel like, that's a really point of difference in America, where people say, I wrote this, it was great. And you get used to it. Oh, yeah, that's okay. They're allowed to say that. That's what they've been taught to say. We've been taught to say.
Yeah.
I think, we always use I think.
Yeah. Well, do you reckon?
Where they just say the statement.
Yeah. So I just think, that line's going in a song. That line works. And then I'll think, it's such a surreal, whimsical, psychedelic, nonsense thing that sounds cool and has some mysterious, high-minded meaning. And then later I'll realize like it was really just really explicit, if that makes sense. Like I'll just be like, I was just confessing what I actually think. And now I'm kind of worried about the garden. So I was like, is somebody going to get knocked in the head in the garden? Am I going to die in the garden or something? And then, because everything happens out of order, and I didn't go from watching What We Do in the Shadows to watching Nadja to writing the song. I watched Nadja like this weekend just gone in preparation to talk to you. And it's like, this is the way these things fit together. It's like they do make sense, but it's like, how that doesn't make sense.
Coming from comedy, I find it quite exciting about music and drama and stuff, that people don't always know what it's about, or they figure it out later. And I like that. You don't do that in comedy, usually. Some people do, but usually you're trying to, you want people to relate as soon as they can. I used to go and see these people's plays, and there was always a big discussion about what the scene meant. And then I was in one of their plays, and then I asked, what does the scene mean? And he's like, the director's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
I like that even more than having an answer. There's interpretation, and it's left up to the audience or the artist themselves at a different time.
But then that's where the bullshit can creep in too, So it's like you have to be vigilant, because like the thing that's cool about comedy is if nobody's laughing, it's not good.
And when you're first working on something new, you can change it. The next time you do it, it will be different. Yeah. Like that line didn't work, change that line. And then music, you don't get that kind of reaction very much, unless you say, like you want people to dance, and you can go, let's play it a bit faster, a bit slower.
Yeah.
Let's take out the bit.
We have this thing where we like have some carny language that we use. I don't want to get too far away from that feeling of like that you're a traveling carnival or something, that you're actually there to give people entertainment or whatever. And I have a friend that I've known from high school. He's really obsessed with wrestling, and we got like certain language, and well, the one that we always use is in wrestling. They say you get a pop. So we talk about that all the time. And a pop is just when the audience goes, whoa, at some thing. And Christian, our new keyboard player, he's a teacher at Berkeley, and is like a proper musician, like a proper jazz musician and stuff. And there's this kind of like pressure to not give in to the most carny aspects of it, because we don't want to lose his respect. And get too rock and roll and too Spinal Tap to the point where we're just kind of doing the same tricks every night to get the same pops, And so the whole thing is like just turning that into something a bit more esoteric, where it's like trying to figure out, it's like, how can you make the audience get a wow out of the audience doing something that you've never done before, or trying to figure out something that's going to make you go, wow, oh. Why did everybody respond to that one thing? And it's like, I feel like that's the closest thing to, like a laugh that we can get.
I notice with us when we play, often it's the first time where you haven't even finished writing it, but there's some excitement that you have, which is the nervousness, like, how's it going to go? We've got to get through this song. And there's all these parts to it, and we don't quite know how to play it yet.
Yeah.
And sometimes it gets this real reaction that you're never going to see again.
Yeah.
Where we have this song, it's from the TV shows, and it's from Flight of the Conchords TV show, and it's called Jemaine, You Don't Have to Be a Prostitute, and it's partly based on Roxanne by Sting.
Yeah.
And we used to play it sometimes on tour, not there that often, and sometimes we'd go into Roxanne at the end, and we'd say, Jemaine, But one time Sting came to the show, and so we're like, we've got to do that song. And like, we haven't done that song for 3 years. And I think, our nervousness of playing his song to him just made it go off in a way that it never, ever had before.
My friend was asking me, do you get nervous before you go on stage? And I was like, it's such a complicated question, because it's like, of course you do, but sometimes you kind of think, it's like that thing of like, it can get really weird, because sometimes it might be like, I was standing next to that guy who was smoking a joint, and then I had 2 shots of tequila, and then I took a quick shit, and then you think, I have to do that every single show. You kind of like get this thing where
you've got to time your meals to get that shit on time.
Yeah, and then you're like, I've got to pretend that Sting is in the audience. So he's doing all these things.
We've got to get him in the audience.
Yeah. Or makes Sting show up for every show or whatever.
One thing you can't get is the audience has a different chemistry of its own.
Yeah.
And I didn't really realize that until I did some movies and watched the movies again with different audiences. And this audience loves this joke, or this audience loves this movie. This audience is quiet on it. I was like, oh, wow. It's actually the different combination of this group of people that has its own life, and you can't control that.
I suppose the thing that's good about the live show is you sort of can put your antenna out and try and figure out like what do these people want, today? How are they feeling? Because you can't do the big spectacular show if everybody's kind of like getting if everybody's in groovy ghost mode, then they might not want like
to build
Kiss,
up to it. Yeah. Right. Being your first tour back, were you nervous the first time standing on stage after a long time?
Yeah, because I've very rarely been on stage sober in a long time. I drink less now, but it's just the idea of not being, at least taking a little bit of liquid courage before going out is still really hard for me, because when I go to shows, I look at performers and I think that's impossible, because from the audience, when you're in the dark and you're looking at the person on stage and then they have the lights on them, you think, I do that. That's insane.
Yeah.
Because it's so nice to be in the audience and enjoy the show in the shadows, just kind of, you don't have to do anything but kind of enjoy the show. And then you think, oh my God, how am I going to get in front of those people? And I haven't really quite figured out how to do it without kind of dumbing myself down a bit. But I'm kind of like incorporating sober gigs and slowly, but I always find myself like thinking about stuff. Like I say a line, and often when I'm doing a song, I'll think about the thing that the song is about, and I'll get quite caught up in the emotions of it. But when I'm sober and I do that, I get in my head too much, and then the next thing I'm like forgotten I'm on stage, and I'll make a little like mistake or something like that.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people have a persona, even if they don't let the audience know there is one. Like Prince had his different personas that he thought of himself, Beyonce, and definitely Brett and I do have these personas which are based loosely on ourselves. I only remember one time where it was hard to do. We were in this tiny gig where it was basically like a box where 10 people can fit. It was an Edinburgh Festival thing, and they're so close to you, and you know they can tell you're not really that person.
Oh, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. It was harder than playing a big gig.
Yeah,
when they're that close to you, you're like, oh, they know we're not quite like this because they can see it in our eyes. So I guess we should wrap up soon. But I find one interesting thing about, I've been in Tonga recently, working with a friend of mine who's Samoan, and we keep comparing the different Polynesian cultures and words. We're always excited. Oh, they call it a wheke too. That's octopus for the listener. Things like that. But then one thing that's really different is the music. So the music in Cook Islands is like really rhythmic, exciting drums, and the music in Hawaiian's quite it's like a Hawaiian breeze, I suppose. And then the Maori music is very sad, and a lot of flutes.
Yeah, Maori are like the goths of the Polynesian realm.
I think that's like to me is the biggest reminder that the cultures are different, although they're very closely related.
Yeah.
Where do you think that comes from? Why is the New Zealand? Why are we the Goths?
The first thing that would come to my mind is the weather.
Yeah, well, the Goths, the music group, the Goths, is from England, which is cold as well. So it's interesting how a landscape can inform a culture, and art, visual art from the South Island is different from visual art in the North Island. And, I have to explain something. I haven't had much breakfast and the microphone is right near my stomach. So you might have heard these noises, and I have to admit it's me. It's not Ruben.
It's not part of our accent.
They kind of gurgle when they talk.
Yeah, there's a rumbling sound.
Okay, well, that was our podcast.
Cool. I don't know what we talked about, but I think I asked you all the questions that I wanted to ask you. I don't want to nerd on about music stuff too much, but I do want to learn about it at the same time. Yeah, cool. All right. Cool. Sweet. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for letting me talk to Jemaine.
Thanks for listening to the Talkhouse Podcast, and thanks to Jemaine Clement and Ruban Nielson for chatting. If you like what you heard, please follow Talkhouse on your favorite podcasting platform, and be sure to check out all the goodies at talkhouse.com. This episode was produced by Myron Kaplan, and the Talkhouse theme is composed and performed by The Range. See you next time.